Hello, everyone. I wanted to take this opportunity to give you a quick update about what's been going on. The last time we did an update was the last day of school, and I told you as soon as we knew more in the summer that we would do an update. Normally we do these where everybody comes together at the same time in a Zoom meeting. I figured with vacations and everything else, it's a little rough to be able to do that right now in the middle of July. So I thought I'd do this instead and do a video recording. So basically you can watch this whenever it's convenient for you. But I did feel like I wanted to make sure that you were updated on the latest things that are happening in our district and the state and everything else. So let me go ahead and share my screen. I do have a quick PowerPoint that will share with you some things that are going on. So for those of you who, and I know all of you have been paying close attention to what's happening at the state level, and there's certainly no shortage of information coming in terms of what's happening in different districts and what's happening around the state. But on the last day of June, the governor released her back to school roadmap. And so I'd like to just talk a little bit through that. And what you'll see here is just a little clip of information about what is in the Safe Schools roadmap. And it really provides just some recommendations, some required safety protocols that we have to implement in the fall in order to keep our school communities safe. But the key piece of this that I really want to draw your attention to is the part here that's underlined and in red, and that is the part that this plan, the Safe Schools Roadmap, is directly connected to the Michigan Safe Start Plan, which is the 6 phases. I've shared this document with you before, and you will remember, hopefully, and if not, I will put a link again in the email so you can see this. This is not intended for you to read everything that's on this. You can look at the link if you want to read these materials. You've seen this before. I've shared it in previous updates, but this is what the Safe Schools Roadmap is connected to. And so basically, depending on what phase our district and or the region is in, so if our state is in phase 3, phase 4, phase 5, whatever, that would determine what happens in our schools. And so that's kind of what happens now with how we have to put together this plan. So the executive order requires really 3 plans: a plan for phases 1 through 3, a plan for phase 4, and a plan for phase 5. So the pieces of this that are important is that if we are in any of these phases, 1 through 3, there will be no in-person instruction. All instruction will be done remotely. If we are in either 4 or 5, there is in-person instruction that's allowed, but that is with safety protocols. And obviously what happens in 4 is a little stronger in terms of safety protocols than what happens in 5. But generally speaking, those are the 2 kind of pieces of what's happening with teaching and learning, is either fully remote for 1 through 3, or for 4 or 5, it would include in-person instruction. The reason that I put 4 and 5 together here is that what you'll see if you look, and I have the link in the email that this video came in, is what you'll see is that the safety protocols that are required in phase 4 are strongly recommended or recommended in phase 5. So a lot of the same things that we would be doing in 4 will show up in some form or another in 5. So a lot of our work really is going to be working in 4. The other thing I do want to point out is that there really is no need for safety protocols post-pandemic or when we're in that phase 6, because that would kind of be back to normal, everything back to the way things were. And so there are no specific requirements other than what we've already always kind of had in place as safety measures. So again, just a reminder that phases 1 through 3 by the state, they require that we only provide remote instruction. And in phases 4 and 5, they allow face-to-face and a possibility of remote for phases 4 and 5. So some other requirements that I just think are important to share with you is that as this plan gets developed, by August 15th, we have to have it approved by our local school board, our local board of education. That we are likely going to have to add a board meeting on August 10th in order for the board to consider the plan. Obviously, they'll have it before that, but we don't have the ability to wait until the end of August, which is when our normal board meeting would be, and there's no way that the plan's going to be ready for the end of July. There's just too many components to it, and we want to make sure we get it right. Once that plan is voted on by the Board of Education, it will go to the ISD and be posted on our district website. And then the ISD will submit it to the state of Michigan and the Michigan Department of Education. A key piece is that the district cannot operate schools this fall until this plan is developed and approved. So if you look at the return to school roadmap, you'll notice there are 4 main categories of work and planning that are in that. The first is safety protocols. The second is mental and social emotional health. The third is instruction, and the operations section is kind of the 4th main section. And so pretty much everything about how we safely operate schools is going to be looked at in these 4 different categories. So here's a summary of what's in the return to schools roadmap. And the reason I'm sharing this is I just think it's important, if you haven't had time to look at it, to know what you will see if you do take the opportunity to look at it. And so that you're able to kind of have an idea as your neighbors and friends start to quiz and ask you about, hey, you work in a school, what do you think is going to happen? These are the things that are spelled out very clearly in the return to school roadmap. First and foremost, if we are in phases 1, 2, or 3, our schools will be closed for in-person instruction. Just like what happened at the end of last school year, school employees and contractors can still come into the buildings for the purposes of conducting our basic school operations. And we will be operating food distribution program, but really all in-person school activities, including teaching and learning in person, will be discontinued. There will be no sports, there'll be no extracurricular, obviously field trips, all of that, all of it canceled if we're in phases 1, 2, or 3. If we're in phases 4, this is where in-person instruction is permitted with safety protocols. And I'm going to share with you a number of what those safety protocols are that are either required or strongly recommended. Again, just so you know for your information, and if you get questions, you can start to answer those. This is really where most of the work is going to take place as we're planning for next year. And the reason is because we've never operated schools like this. We've done the fully remote, although what we'll be doing in the fall, if we are fully remote, will look slightly different, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And we've done fully in person, but what we haven't done is this in person with safety protocols. And that there's a lot of details to that need to be worked out. And so I'll share some of that with you, although it's not all finalized, give you a little bit of information that might help to at least start to answer the questions that you're hearing. So these are some of the safety protocol examples of what people can expect if we are in phase 4 or 5 and we return to in-person instruction. Facial coverings, there's a huge section of the roadmap that's committed to that, and it talks a lot about the conditions under which they're required and situations where they're not, and so on. Essentially, the facial coverings in the roadmap are required to always be worn by staff except for meals. and unless there are medical documented situations that prevent employees from wearing those facial coverings. Now, when I say facial coverings, it's pretty clear in the language that they don't specifically mean a surgical mask directly. They do allow for homemade masks and other kinds of facial coverings, which is why you'll notice here it talks repeatedly about facial coverings and not just masks. So I think it's, our goal would be to assure or find ways that people can continue to wear facial coverings that do fit any medical restrictions that they may have. It also talks about facial coverings being worn and required for any pre-K through 12 students and all staff and bus drivers during school transportation. And so every time students get on buses, again, the masks will be going on in order to help prevent the spread of potential disease. Facial coverings must also be worn in hallways and common areas, again, by all students pre-K-12 in the building, except for during mealtime. And then also facial coverings that it is addressed that it must be worn in classrooms by students 6 through 12, and it's highly recommended that it's also considered for kindergarten through 5th grade, unless those students remain in a single classroom for their entire day. When it comes to hygiene, we are and have been accumulating hand sanitizer, soap, paper towels, tissues, signs, all of the kinds of things related to ensuring we have the materials we need to adequately supply our schools. We also are going to have to teach and reinforce hand washing and the use of hand sanitizer on a regular basis. And then the final piece, which again is one of the challenges that we're going to have to figure out, is how we limit the sharing of personal items. And when we talk about personal items, they're really more just supplies that a student may use. Right now, in a number of our classes, we share things like crayons and other things. That will be something where we have to come up with procedures and processes for ensuring that every student has their own, again, to minimize cross-contamination. When it comes to spacing, movement, and access, the following are strongly recommended. That is that they recommend teachers maintain 6 feet of spacing between themselves and their students as much as possible. And when it says between themselves, I think it means other teachers. So, but it's this whole idea of practicing social distancing in the classroom space as much as possible. Also, the use of floor tape or other markers that would allow us to demonstrate what a 6-foot interval looks like. And again, that's an example of, like, when we're lining up students, we would need to have dots or some kind of shamrocks or something that students would stand on that would demonstrate a 6-foot spacing for lines that might go into the hallways or other things like that. Also in the safety protocols for spacing, movement, and access, they strongly recommend the limiting of family members and other guests into the schools, and really only allowing our staff and the students that are there for teaching and learning to be in the schools, and to minimize the potential of others coming into the school space. Some other requirements that are in the return to school roadmap, these are just some examples. And again, in the email that this video came in, there are links to the full plan. So if you want to look through that, you can. But there are requirements related to screening staff and students, responding when a positive case of COVID comes up, what food service, extracurricular athletics looks like, how to appropriately clean and disinfect, and then also some additional stuff on transportation and busing. They also have strong recommendations for expectations and practices for instruction, for our facilities, for technology, food service, social emotional supports, mental health supports, and so on. So the next part of what I want to share with you is more specific to instruction itself. So there are right now teams of people that are working on what instruction's going to look like in the fall when we return. They're really focusing on two main pieces. There is the face-to-face teaching and learning, which we are all very familiar with. And then there is this virtual teaching and learning, which we are less familiar with. We have had a virtual program at the high school level previously. This is the first time we're really looking at a K-12 virtual learning experience for our entire district. So there's a lot of effort being looked at and put into the understanding and making choices about what makes the most sense when it comes to virtual teaching and learning. Now, the reason these two pieces are so important is what I've shared previously, is that we're looking at offering three options to our families. One is face-to-face, which is students coming into classrooms, into our schools on a regular basis and every day, and being there in front of a teacher. Another is virtual, where students would work from home strictly on virtual classes, either available strictly online or in some cases with some supports and additional materials that might be hard copy print materials. And then there's a hybrid, which might be a combination of the two of these, like some face-to-face, maybe a couple days a week, or face-to-face this week and the next week being remote or something like that. All of these models really combine in different ratios the two top boxes here. This idea of the virtual teaching and learning and the face-to-face, it really is just a matter of how much of each of those makes up the face-to-face hybrid or the virtual. If we think about face-to-face, the biggest part of that is going to be this face-to-face in-person teaching and learning. But right behind that and in support of that is this virtual teaching and learning. And the main reason for that is because we may at any point have to go fully virtual with a face-to-face class. And so the best way to do that is to always have that virtual piece being a part of the face-to-face teaching and learning that's taking place in our schools. If we think about hybrid, it's really a balance more of the two, and it doesn't mean they'll be equal. It just means there's more face-to-face and more virtual that kind of shows up, and they kind of balance each other out. We might expect something like a 50-50 or a 40-60 split on those. And when we think about virtual, that's where the virtual teaching, the remote teaching and learning takes the forefront. And we still may have a face-to-face component that goes along with that. For example, if a student is struggling with reading and needs an intervention, we may offer a face-to-face intervention for a student who is otherwise fully virtual. So those, again, are it's essentially the same two programs, the face-to-face and virtual, but in different ratios. So the groups that are working on these instructional models are looking at these kinds of questions. They are asking about, how should content be delivered? What's best done online and what potentially is better done in person? There's also questions about what resources we use, what platforms we use, both face-to-face and in person to support teaching and learning. And then there are also questions about how well we know how to use these materials and these resources. And when we don't know, or if we're concerned about not knowing, then we ask the question about what professional development do we need to do to ensure that we're able to deliver in any of the three models, face-to-face, hybrid, or virtual. So in face-to-face, I do want to just reiterate why it's so critical that we still keep a virtual piece as a part of face-to-face. And that is that at any point, what we've seen is that we may have to move to fully remote at any point, just like what happened in March. The key with this is that if we have to go remote, we don't want to scramble at the last minute. We want to have a reliable system, one that we're comfortable with, one that our students have already been using, one that our parents are familiar with, so that it's already been defined and we can jump into it whenever needed. In terms of hybrid and virtual, the kinds of questions that are being considered right now by our instructional teams is how much hybrid and how much, when we think about hybrid, how much face-to-face is the right amount of face-to-face and how much virtual is the right amount of that. Again, both of these models need to be ready to go to fully remote at any time. So those are the kinds of questions, in addition to questions about, what makes sense for us in terms of expectations about synchronous time, time where teachers and students are online together at the same time doing certain activities, and what can be done asynchronously where we have an activity that students would log in and do on their own without the teacher necessarily being present. So those are the kinds of things that are being looked at when it comes to instruction. So what I want to share with you is kind of what you can expect over the next few weeks, and because this plan is due by August 15th, and it will be probably in front of the board on August 10th. And so as we start to finalize these, we will certainly be communicating and making sure you know what to expect. But basically, you can expect to be hearing more information about specific strategies, procedures, and things like that related to our safety protocols, our mental and social emotional health, instruction, and our operations. Some of those decisions are decided for us in the roadmap, and then other decisions are really up to us to figure out how do we, for example, move students in our schools in a way that is safe and maintains health. And so those are the kinds of questions that we're really posing to our school leadership and involving stakeholders to figure those pieces out. Another thing you can do is click the link in the email that this came with that will take you to this Safe Schools roadmap. You can see what's being recommended, and it may answer some additional questions. This is really a summary, but if you want to know more in detail, you can look at that in the meantime. I'm going to take off my screen sharing, but before I do that, I do want to let you know my plan is to do an update sometime in early August before the August 10th board meeting, when that plan will be finalized, and I'll be able to give you more details on that. So with that, I do want to just take an opportunity to share with you a couple pieces that I think are just really, really important for you to be thinking about. I, like you, am getting questions from parents. I'm getting questions from my neighbors. I'm getting questions from some of you about, what is school going to look like in the fall? And the short answer is we don't know. We are planning right now for a three-pronged approach that includes face-to-face, hybrid, and virtual. That's the planning that's taking place. Does that mean that we're going to be face-to-face? Not necessarily. A week ago, 2 weeks ago, I was really confident that we would be back face-to-face. And recently, events in the state of Michigan with increasing cases and things like that have started to shift my thinking that maybe we won't be. And it's possible that no matter what the phase is that we're in as a region or as a state, that there may be other things that we have to consider in making our own local decision about whether we are going to be face-to-face, in person, or in a virtual environment. The key piece here is I'm not really trying to make any kind of a political statement, and I know there are many opinions and many different kinds of perspectives about whether we should be back face-to-face, how we should be back to face, and what conditions there should be placed on being back face. And what I can tell you is that that decision is likely not going to be made in this district by any one person. It's likely going to be a much bigger decision that involves the local health department, that involves decisions that are happening with the Michigan Department of Education, and that involves decisions that are made related to the Safe Start initiatives and whether we're moved back, for example, to phase 3, in which case we don't even have a choice about being open in person. So I think right now, being 6 weeks away from the start of the school year, in a normal school year, we would expect that all of the decisions for the start of the school year would already be made. That would be in a normal year. This isn't a normal year. I don't think that we are going to be waiting until the week before school starts for a decision. But right now, with 6 weeks, there is a lot that can happen. I mean, who knows, even tomorrow, something could change pretty significantly that makes the decision really clear about what needs to happen in September. But right now, we don't know the answer. So what I can reiterate to you is that we are planning for a 3-pronged instructional approach. That doesn't mean that we're going to be face-to-face. It doesn't mean that we're going to be fully virtual. We do know that we have families that desire a fully virtual experience, as well as we have families that desire both a hybrid and a face-to-face experience. So we are serving a population of our community here where there are differing views about whether or not schools should or should not open. And so those are things we're continuing to look at, and we are making sure that we are planning to ensure that no matter what happens in September, that we are able to ensure the health and safety of our students, our staff, and their families. We see that as being the most important thing that we can possibly do. With that, in preparation for that, there are things you can be doing in the meantime. Start thinking about your responsibilities, your job responsibilities in relationship to the roadmap. You know, how will you do basic classroom procedures in this new COVID situation if we are face-to-face? What does it look like? How would you organize materials? Those are all the kinds of questions that I think are really important for you to start thinking about related to your own positions and your own considerations. In addition to that, all of our staff needs to be ready to be in some capacity or another, ready to teach remotely. Whether you are primarily face-to-face, whether we are doing hybrid or whether we are fully remote, at any time we could all be asked to go fully remote. And it's going to be different than what we did at the end of last school year, because the end of last school year we did review, we did enrichment. This will be a fully, the expectations are that every single class that we offer in person is being converted to some kind of a remote course that is fully expected to meet the expectations outlined that we would, just like we would meet if we were face-to-face. That's a completely different challenge than what we faced at the end of last school year. So start thinking about that. Start thinking about your own skill set. How comfortable are you in teaching online, and what are some things you might need to learn and might need to look for some professional development on your own about, or asking for support and from your departments, from your colleagues to learn the kinds of skills that we are all going to need if we are not face-to-face or if we're fully remote. So with that, again, first couple of weeks of August, you should expect to hear another update. There'll probably be about 2 or 3 weeks. And we'll be sharing more details about the plan. We'll probably give you that, and then provide a summary in this. But if if you have any other questions, feel free to email, reach out, and I'm happy to try to answer those as we go. But thank you so much for your time today. I hope you are enjoying your summer. I hope you and your family are healthy and safe, and we look forward to getting back to whatever our school environment holds in the fall. So we'll talk to you soon.